Welcome to Blueprints for Brilliance Coaching Insights, a podcast by coaches for coaches. Our guests share their hard-won wisdom to help you grow your coaching business and create a life of success. So get ready to unlock the blueprints to your success. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode. I'm excited to introduce you to Alisa DiLorenzo. Her company is One Extraordinary Marriage, and she is a marriage and relationship coach. So welcome to the show, Alisa.
Oh, Jeanne, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your story. How did you become and why did you become a marriage and relationship coach?
Well, I will say it's not anything I ever set out to be. I did not grow up saying I wanted to be a marriage and relationship coach. It really came out of the struggles that my husband and I had in our own marriage. And back in 2008, we took radical steps to head off divorce for the second time in our marriage to really learn how to make our marriage a priority. And as we started sharing this with other people, they're like, how do we get to do what you did? And we would get the emails, we would hear the conversations, and you have enough people ask you, how do I do what you did? That you start to go, well, could I teach someone? Could I coach them through? Could I come alongside them and equip them with tools and strategies? And so it's been 12 or 13 years now that I started coaching. Started with just a simple, tell me what's going on in your marriage.
I love that. It usually does come from something that happened to you. Mm-hmm. And from somebody who has been through a divorce, it's not fun. Try and fix it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there were as many relationship coaches back then. It was more like you went to like a counselor or a therapist. So what would make your coaching a little bit different?
I love that question because I think a lot of people are familiar with the counseling model. And what I liken it to, because I've heard this from a lot of my coaching clients who have come out of counseling, let's look at all the information we know. Let's create a game plan and let's go execute it. And then we can look at the game film in the next session, the conversation that we have, to be able to evaluate what worked, what didn't, where the strengths are, where we had some holes and weaknesses. And then let's keep building skills and strategies to actually be able to win at this thing called marriage.
I love that. It's not always easy.
No.
So do you work with both the couple together or individually, or how do you work your sessions?
And yes, I love working with couples, but I understand too that there are times when one spouse is ready and the other one isn't. And one of my guiding beliefs is to always start with what can I do? And so looking at the spouse that's ready to take action and step into, let's talk about strategies. Let's talk about where you're finding some weakness in yourself or within the marriage, and let's equip you at that point in time. Often another spouse will come on board. And even when I start working with a couple, both of them at the same time, there are times when we'll do individual sessions because they're processing something. They realize that something has come up.
That makes total sense because sometimes you just want to get it out there and it doesn't always come out well. Mm-hmm. And for somebody like a coach like you who's listening.
Correct.
It sounds like when you start with someone, you do an assessment?
I do have an application on the front side of coaching. And the reason for this is twofold. One, it helps me to know what the situation is, what a couple has tried, what their goals are. But it also helps the applicants to really think through not just, oh my gosh, we've got problems, I need help, but specifically, what are our problems? And I find that it's very cathartic, even as a very first step, to analyze the situation and understand in those first moments, where are we and what are we looking to achieve? Or what am I looking to achieve in coaching?
Yeah, I would think that coaching would also, I would think, be more like holistic, looking at everything. You're looking at how the person feels about themselves, because that has a lot to do with it. If I feel insecure, then I'm going to assume that you're attacking me all the time when that might not be the case. Did you agree?
Absolutely. We can become so triggered, heightened, emotional, whatever word a person is comfortable with, when we are feeling disconnected from our spouse. And everything can feel like an attack or a criticism, where individually we might be dealing with something. And I've often shared with my coaching clients, a marriage is only going to be as healthy as the two individuals are healthy within the marriage, and strengthen the individuals so that the marriage relationship can be much stronger.
That's interesting, because I remember when my husband and I, we agree on most things. And mm-hmm. So we don't fight very often. And then we got into our first fight and I was like, oh my God, I was totally freaked out. And he's like, look, it's normal for people to fight, not smackdown drag out fight, but to disagree. and walk away and say, we don't agree on that. And that's okay.
I think that's a point that actually needs to be made more and more in our culture. We are going to see the world differently. We should disagree on everything. In a book that I wrote called The 6 Pillars of Intimacy, one of the statements I make in there is that if the two of you were the same, one of you becomes unnecessary in this marriage. And agree that there are going to be times that they're going to disagree. And it is okay that we don't agree 100% of the time.
And I'd also like to think if you were matched with the right person, that they end up pushing you a little bit further than maybe you'd want to go in a good way. They might not do it properly. And that's something that you can always work on. But sometimes you don't want to go out of your comfort zone because it's uncomfortable. But if you've got someone else who says, well, let's try this or let's do this, and you can just say, I'm just going to trust in them and in this happening, then it can be very enriching.
100%. And that's where the vulnerability, really being able to strengthen that emotional intimacy over the life of a marriage or the life of a relationship is so critical, because that's what allows us to feel safe. That's what allows us to assume the best from the other person. If I believe that you have my best interest at heart, then when you push me or stretch me a little bit, I can go there because you want the best for me and you want the best for our relationship. You're not trying to stretch me from a malicious standpoint.
I love that. A lot of times we think people are thinking a lot more about us than they are. So we're taking in some of these things. When we get angry, we take in all these little things that, oh, well, they must be thinking that when he's actually thinking about when their next rugby match is. He's no, doesn't really care. He isn't thinking about me at all. I think we need to remember that a little bit too.
Yes, because in the absence of information, the imagination will run wild.
So tell us a little bit about maybe a client or two, no names, but how their relationship was or how they felt when they came to you, and then how they felt after they worked with you.
Jeanne, I have so many miracle stories over the last 12 years. I'm reminded of one couple and literally on the cusp of divorce. This was a make or break. And there had been pornography in their marriage. There had been just screaming matches. She had a lot of anger issues. He was dealing with pornography. They were so disconnected and they weren't quite ready to give up yet. So they started showing up for their sessions, and I kept feeling there was some kind of resistance, specifically on the wife's side. And so she and I did an individual session, and I had this vision in the middle of the session because she was talking about her husband, and she's actually angry that he would bring her tea every morning to her bedside. And I said, you do realize that 99% of the husbands in America are not bringing their wives tea every morning? And she paused, and I just had this revelation in that moment that it was almost like she had Pandora's box in her heart. And she had held all these moments of hurt, disappointment, forgiveness or unforgiveness, bitterness. And every once in a while she'd just crack it open. Like, oh, am I still mad at him? And it would flood her. And so we had this beautiful conversation about Pandora's box and unforgiveness. And she actually made the decision to start choosing forgiveness and for recognizing that her husband was growing. And it's so beautiful now because that was probably 9 years ago. And every year on their wedding anniversary, I get a thank you note. I get an email from her specifically, just recognizing it's another year of marriage. Yeah. As a couple that still wants to be married, they'd just gotten lost in all the years of the hustle and bustle, almost look like 20-somethings again in that newlywed phase of being able to go, we still like each other. And we aren't going to just get divorced because we've gone through this really tough time. We're going to rediscover and be curious about one another again.
Oh, I love that. That's so lovely. We're almost empty nesters and we have friends who are coming up behind us. So that's very relevant. And we've always said it's really important for us to do stuff together, just us, so that we do like each other still and like to hang out together. I love that. So giving us a little bit of an idea, but tell us who the perfect person or the ideal client, if you will, who is ready for your help or needs to come to you.
Generally, the clients that are coming to me are somewhere between 40 and 55, give or take. But in those 20-ish years married, 15 to 25, they've gone through life. The kids are getting older. They're trying to figure out what that next step is. And at least one, if not both, are sitting there going, I know we need different actions to be effective, but we don't know what those actions are. So there's this idea that if we can get equipped, we can make a difference. We just don't know what we need to be equipped with. And they've tried books, they've tried podcasts, but they know they need that accountability. They need that, hey, are you going to check in with me and ask me if I did this? And those are my favorite clients because I get to pour gasoline on their desire for a stronger marriage and watch it just fan into this flame of connection and communication and cooperation. It's just a beautiful.
Oh, it's so wonderful. There are people out there like you helping people who, like you said, they want to stay together, but they just don't know how. And it's so important to have people like you to connect them back together again.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So let's say we have someone in the audience who's thinking they might be falling into your ideal client. They might be arguing a little too much or feeling disconnected. What are a couple things you might recommend to them to move them just a couple tiny steps forward?
Well, one of the first steps that I share with almost everyone is start small, right? Start with baby steps. Don't try and do a complete overhaul of your marriage and just jump ahead like what you might see on social media. I want the fancy dinners and I want the big vacations and I want this. Start small and think, what can I do? So often we expect to look at our spouse and go, well, you need to, and we start putting our finger out. If you did this, and take that self-reflection and say, what can I do? Maybe I need to put my phone down when I'm talking to my spouse. Maybe I need to ask my spouse out on a date. Maybe we just need to go grab an ice cream cone together and sit and people watch. It starts with those small bids for connection, because that's often what gets lost, connection and curiosity over a long-term relationship. And so you make little bids, you ask questions. Don't just say, how was your day? Tell me one exciting thing that happened in your day today. Tell me one thing you struggled with today, and allow that space. And don't expect it to be perfect when you first do it. It's been a little while since you've done that. And it's going to feel like trying to ride a bike the first time, where you're like, I'm a little wobbly and I don't know how to hold on. And so you start small and you start with yourself.
I love that. And I think people have a little more control. I like to think they do, of the energy in their house than they know. So, because I always know if I start doing just little tiny kind things, like your friend whose husband brought her a cup of tea. Hey, do you want me to make you something? Or would you like a cup of coffee? Or they love when the bed's made in the morning and you make the bed without question. Sometimes that starts the positivity in the household. Would you say that?
Oh, yes. We keep thinking, and I alluded to this just a second ago, we think it's our spouse's responsibility to change the environment. Instead of saying, well, if it starts with me, in my case, if I'm waiting for my husband to do something, I could be waiting a really long time. But if I start where he wants to reciprocate, where he starts showing consideration to me, where he starts doing the little things. But if we take ownership, put a smile on your face. If it's been really grumpy for a long time, it might just be nice to walk into a house where you're smiling, or you say a kind word, or you sit next to one another on the couch. These don't have to be earth-shattering, multi-hour conversations. It might just be that, may I bring you a cup of tea? And knowing that we're seen, we're valued, we have worth to our spouse goes a long way to shifting the environment.
I was even remembering, I think I used to put in my kids' lunch boxes little messages that said, have a good day. I'm thinking of you, or something like that. So, I love this. So, Alisa, if people want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to do that?
The best way is to go to the website, which is oneextraordinarymarriage.com. One, that'll get you to all the information that we have, but there's also a link there for coaching. And you can just click on that link and be able to apply for coaching. It's the easiest way that we've brought everything all together.
I love that. And one is ONE. It's not the number one. And we'll put a link to that in the show notes below. But also tell us a little bit about, you guys have a podcast, a long running podcast. Tell us about that.
We do. Tony and I started the One Extraordinary Marriage show back in January of 2010. We have recorded at least one episode every week since that point in time. And the entire catalog is Tony and I discussing different aspects of our own marriage, of those marriages within our community we call the One Family, and really being able to brainstorm, not just talk about a problem, but also give solutions and action steps to what couples are facing everywhere, and normalizing a lot of these conversations.
I love that. And what's the name of the podcast?
It's called the One Extraordinary Marriage Show.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. So last question for you, Alisa. If you could provide one tip to make the world a better place, what would that be?
Be intentional and take action. When we set our intent and then we put action behind it, that's where the extraordinary happens.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been fantastic. And I know that people listening who are struggling are feeling hope and looking forward to the future. So thank you for bringing that.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us today on Blueprints for Brilliance Coaching Insights. We hope you're leaving this episode with inspiration to take your coaching business and your life to the next level. If you found value in this episode, we would love it if you would subscribe and share it with someone else who you think might benefit from hearing it. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.